Hello YouTube, this is Dr. Ronald W. Satz, founder and chair of the International Society of Unified Science and president of TransPower Corporation, a commercial and custom software manufacturing and certified systems engineering company. I work as a theoretical physicist and as a systems and mechanical engineer. I also work as a theoretical economist and operations researcher. I even do some parliamentary work. My theoretical physics mentor was Joey B. Larson. He was also my theoretical physics or physical science mentor. What I've done with his work over the past 50 years is to make everything computational and up to date. This includes his physical science work, which is referred to as the reciprocal system, and also his work in economics, which is referred to Larsonian Econophysics. Name of the software package, and this is my latest and probably last commercial software package, is called Optimal Economist, an implementation of Larsonian Econophysics. I've already covered the microeconomics of individuals, companies, and business sectors in previous screencasts, and I've covered the layouts. Well, I should point out, wait, I got a call, but it's not important. Forget that. I've also covered all the graphs for the microeconomics section of the software. I covered the layout for the two layouts actually for the countries, and I covered the first 24 of the 48 graphs for the macroeconomics section. So today we're going to cover the second half, that is the remaining 24 graphs of the macroeconomics section. So just click here, and I just want to make sure, yes, we covered the growth of GDP observed. So now we're going to go right to the GDP with the projection factors. So generate the graph data, generate the graph, okay? So that's with the projection factors. It's going up. By the way, this shows the abscissa. The abscissa is always the year. 15 years of past data, 5 years of projection. The graph commands are all right here. You shouldn't really have to change anything. If you want to, you can play with it. There's a whole PDF of all the commands are included in the program. But you shouldn't have to change anything, except you may want to change right here, the save as a JPEG, the graph itself, if you wanted to. And of course you can save the data here if you want to put this in any other program, but it's certainly not necessary. Alright, let's continue on. So the next one. Here's the growth in percentage of the GDP with the projection factors. Okay, so we always click the graph data button first, and then we click the generate graph button. So there we go. Now it's interesting, a lot of these graphs, they do show a downturn, 2019, 2020, even though the projections were made, years ago, and we couldn't foresee a black swan event like the whole COVID pandemic. So it's kind of interesting. The particular algorithm we use for the projections or extrapolations called Berg's algorithm, you can look it up. It's probably the best algorithm out there. It's not a linear extrapolation, really. It can do oscillations. It's probably the best thing we have, but again, it's impossible to project perfectly, just so you understand that. All right, continuing. The GDP using the mean factors now. And here, if we use the mean factors, we can see it's coming down. So the trend line wasn't looking too good, even prior to the pandemic, to be honest about it. And the growth percent of the GDP with the mean factors. So generate the graph data, generate the graph. We always use those two buttons. And you can see, wow, this one's like constant at minus 0.1%. Look at that. But it's not percent, sorry, just minus 0.1. It's not so good. Alright, so government spending G. Generate the graph data, generate the graph. You can see it reached a peak here after the financial crisis, then it came down, and then it went up, and then it went down. So there it is. This is the projection here. And now we have these huge deficits because of the pandemic, so you know, once the data is put in and projections are moved forward, it'll be interesting to see what happens then. But that's up to you if and when you decide to purchase the package. Which, let me explain right now. We originally priced this at $295, but given that we're in a recession/depression, we've slashed the price all the way down to $95. We still have full service, which means we can answer any question you have by email. I assume that you're an economist or you work at a financial house of some kind, or you're a professor or student or scientist or engineer. You'll have no problem getting the data to put in here and work with the program. So it's only $95. Just about everybody can afford that, and there's nothing like this on the market for that kind of money. Okay, so that's government spending G. Come down, total consumption capital C, generate the graph data, generate the graph. So consumption keeps going up. It's amazing that the consumer is still spending, but at some point with the layoffs and all, that's got to end. Total national savings S. Generate the graph data, generate the graph. And you can see it's leveling off. Now, in reality, it's going to be down. And people will be attempting to hoard their savings at this point, but they may have nothing left to save after using up their reserve in the pandemic. So, you know, it's a once-in-a-100-year thing. All right, now we go to the effective tax rate, tau. And so this is, you can see it reached a peak and now it's coming down, leveling off, lower than 15%. And by the way, we assume that that's the same for both. We assume that the effective tax rate is the same for both wages or labor and capital. Okay, next up would be wages plus investment income per employee. Click that. So this is pretty high, but this includes investment income. It also includes fringe benefits. It's important to understand this. Okay, so next up, taxes per employee. See, it got over 20,000 and then kind of dropped off. Next one, disposable income per employee. This is what's left. It's 110,000. But this is, I'm sure, has come down in this pandemic. And let's keep going here. We got consumption per employee. So this is small c as opposed to big C for national consumption. So it's just at 90,000. By the way, this is not per capita. This is per employee. I just want to make sure that's clear. Um, so this has to pay basically for an entire family. Savings per employee, small s, generate the graph data, generate the graph. So the savings, this includes the savings in Social Security as well as any investment savings. Which, when you think about it, I mean, 20,000 is not a whole lot, but that's the way it is. Savings rate per employee, and it's just about 19% there. It comes down. You can see with the crash and all the loss of work, savings dropped, of course, and then came back up, coming back down. ZP observed this is decimal change in price due to change in C-res, which is the consumer reservoir. So, data in the graph. Here we go. Okay, not too much of a change here. Now, the true interest rate, this is the interest rate after taxes and depreciation. So this is the actual interest rate. It's been coming down. And you can see, I just have to comment on true interest rates. The true interest rate is like a credit card interest rate, minus whatever, but the fake phony interest rates from the Federal Reserve are totally artificial. They cause a bubble in financial assets like homes and the stock market, but they destroy seniors. I mean, who wants to put in money in a bank if you're not getting any interest, basically? And some of the European countries are even worse. They have negative interest rates, which is even more bizarre. But this graph shows, wow, let me just look at this. Historically, for a 10-year bond, the interest rate has been 7%. So if you manage to save $1 million in your work life, you should be able to retire with that and just buy a 10-year bond for 7% and get $70,000 a year, which should be enough to live on in retirement. You and your spouse, and maybe she's earned the same amount, or close. So the interest rates have been coming down, and now they're just totally ludicrous. So this graph is, I think the projection turned out to be correct. Now the CPI observed, this is the observed inflation rate. So remember, 100 means no inflation, and you can see it goes, if the base year is 2005, which it is in all these, instead of 100, then it goes straight up, basically. Imports to GDP observed. And you can see imports versus GDP has come down here. It's kind of what you might expect in a recession, depression. So I got some of these right, even though I didn't know that there would be a black swan event, interestingly enough. Now, likewise with exports per observed GDP, generate the graph data, generate the graph. There we go. Fairly steady, but coming down. Of course, this is really a lot more because of the loss of jobs, but I still got the trend right. The VM0, this is the velocity of the currency, which is based on M0, which is the hard currency. It's the real currency out there. So generate, whoops, do that right. Generate the graph data, generate the graph, and look at this. So the velocity has been coming down, which is kind of interesting. The velocity has in fact been coming down. So even if the Federal Reserve has pumped trillions of dollars into the economy, if it's just stuck in the banks or in financial assets, if it's not actually getting into the purchasing stream of consumers, then velocity is going to come down. And that actually damps down inflation. I always kind of have a laugh at the quantity theorists who don't consider velocity of circulation in their calculations. It's not just like the Fed prints money and that devalues the currency. If that money doesn't get into the purchasing power stream, then nothing really happens. And if the velocity drops, well, then that offsets to some degree the quantity of money. All right, next one. This is the velocity, which is based on the effective amount of the Fed's injection of money into the purchasing power stream we're taken out of it. And you can see it's a little bit negative, so the velocity is coming down. And of course, with the black swan event of the pandemic, it's really, way down. When we come to velocity of circulation, this is the main one. And here it's below 5 here, basically flat. I think this is the last one. Look at that, total taxes T. Generate the graph data, generate the graph. Yep. Let me just go back, maybe I made a mistake. Velocity of circulation. Okay. Total taxes. Okay. That looks better. Total taxes. Well, they've been climbing and then went down with the financial crisis. Then they went up for a while, and they came down, and they're coming back up. I mean, obviously, with all the layoffs, this has been coming down, and the federal government, various state governments are hurting because of the pandemic. All right, well, that's very interesting. We've covered all the graphs of the macroeconomics section of Optimal Economist. I'm just going to close here. So all we have to do next week, which will be the last one, we'll cover the items on the utility menu. All right, thanks for your attention. Please subscribe to my channel. Please like this video. If you have any comments to make them. If you have any questions, I will do my best to answer them. And stay safe in this challenging time.